let's say all the music listeners were willing to listen to music on chain, or the incentives were such that like you'd be crazy to not listen to music on chain. That would change everything. Because now there's no reason someone wouldn't listen to music on chain, and thereby we can like stream payments from their wallet to artists in a second. You could pay by use, how much you listen to, and you could pay directly to the person you listen to, and there would be no overhead fee. Nobody to be paid to make sure that happens, nobody to sue to rectify some cheat. It could happen as you listen to it. You could have micropayments streaming from you directly to the artist.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 215, and we're going to be getting into some pretty cool stuff today. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me today is my awesome guest co-host, Mr. Kyle Circa Lemaire. Cirque, what's up, dude?
What's up? What's up, y'all?
We're continuing on our arc on Web3 and music and crypto and everything that there is to learn on where the future of music could be going in hand with the future of the internet. So I'm excited to dig into a topic that we touched on a bit in last week's episode, which was NFTs.
God, I love them. NFTs? Is that what you're talking about?
That's what we're talking about.
Forget about it. Oh, the best.
I'm excited to dig into NFTs. I feel like this is a topic that a lot of artists kind of wonder about, whether they're getting information or hearing information rather, as the music industry is kind of buzzing about NFTs and scratching their heads wondering like what the big deal is, why people should care about it, if they should even care about it. And then I feel like there are people that are just like, I don't know anything about this. NFT who? I don't know what any of this means. And I thought it would be cool for us to kind of talk about it today and kind of go back to basics and foundations. We talked a bit about blockchain last week, and you gave a really, really helpful sort of rundown of some of the foundations in tech that people should know about, that musicians specifically should know about when it comes to blockchain so that they can think about Web3. I wanted to do the same when it comes to NFTs, and I figured we could kick off this discussion there.
That sounds great, friend. Helpful, confusing. These are words one might use to describe the last episode of the podcast.
A lot of stuff. Yeah, we covered a lot in a little bit of time. So hopefully this episode kind of allows us to break it down into more manageable bite-sized pieces.
That's what we're here to do.
So a lot of questions come up about NFTs. You know, first, like, what the hell are they? Right. What does non-fungible mean? How does all of this work? How is an NFT different from if you bought a Bitcoin, for example, or a fraction of Bitcoin or something like that? I think all of those sorts of questions come up, especially for people that are looking in from the outside and wondering what's happening and why are people talking about it so much. So maybe we start there. What is an NFT? We talked a little bit about tokenization, but let's dig into it a little bit more. What's an NFT? How is it different from, me going and buying Bitcoin right now?
Right. So NFT, for anyone for whom this is like well-worn territory for you, you've heard this style explanation before, just wait. We'll get a little bit deeper than you typically hear it. But NFT is non-fungible token. Fungibility is like a spectrum. It's how exchangeable something is one-to-one for something else. Fungibility, right? It's one way to think about it. And non-fungible just means it cannot be exchanged for anything else. It has unique value, right? So there may be a set of NFTs, there may be one NFT, but any NFT, any token, non-fungible token, doesn't have a definite value by comparison to something else. So it's independently valued. And so a Bitcoin, every Bitcoin has the same value, but every NFT does not have the same value.
Right. I was just going to say, like, if I bought Bitcoin today and you bought Bitcoin today, or if I bought ETH today and you bought ETH today, those tokens are the same. They're worth the same. If we bought right at the same time, they do the same thing. They hold the same value. They're both ETH. They're both Bitcoin. Whereas an NFT, we could buy NFTs from the same vendor or artist or
even the same NFT drop where like 10,000 NFTs were made and you bought one of them, but no one in the set is identical in value, and you can think of value abstractly, right? Value might mean, if we're talking about a language of value, and I say, what's the value of this? You typically think it means if you interpret this to US dollars, what is that amount? But that's just a translation, right? So the value could be like any value. Like if I input a value into an equation, like the number 5, that's a value. Like a value could be a property. It could be a characteristic. So this Bored Ape has googly eyes. That's a value, actually, So indeterminate value is abstract. It doesn't just mean indeterminate value as in like the money it's worth, but it has indeterminate values.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I mean, that explains a lot about how you can think about NFTs and specifically some of the pieces or exclusive perks or whatever you might want to call it that are associated with some of them, especially some of the ones that you see associated with artists that might have like exclusive content paired with it or a specific look to it. Like you said, with like Bored Ape, one might have googly eyes and one might have gold teeth or something like that.
Another way to think about it is that like Bitcoins are not numbered, right? So if I buy a whole Bitcoin, it's not like Bitcoin number 20, It doesn't have an order, like an ordered list number. So each token doesn't have a unique value, as in the value is like, what number is it? But Bored Apes do. Like, so even if every Bored Ape looked exactly the same, they all have a different number, and that's an independent value as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's a carryover in a lot of ways.
A lot of music NFTs only have that difference in value. So a lot of music NFTs, they'll mint like 5,000 and they all have the same image, the same properties. They all are even worth the same, but they have different numbers. So they're still technically NFTs.
Not a whole lot of differentiation there.
No.
Going back to like the history, where did NFTs kind of begin? What was the genesis?
I'm pretty sure, and I'm sure like someone who's as nerdy about blockchain as me might like roast me on this, but so like all of cryptocurrency, once you understand what cryptography does, like what unique superpowers it can give you in a computer environment, right? Like encryption, cryptography. Once you know what that does, a lot of the use cases of that are attractive to certain types of people, specifically like libertarians and psychopaths. people who think like the world is gonna end, right? Or something like that. Or people who are very, very unhappy with their government, right? And that's not just crackpots, because you also have people in Venezuela aren't very happy with their government, but it's not because they're insane, it's because they don't like, being made destitute by rampant inflation, right? So that's just to say that early cryptography had its roots in like libertarian anarcho-capitalist like sects. And there was a newsletter group / like rough, community called CryptoPunks, right? Like cypherpunks. And this was before blockchains even existed. They were just sharing information about cryptography and what it could do. And certainly like everyone thinks the founder of Bitcoin was probably a cypherpunk. And so the first talk about NFTs, I think either comes from Hal Finney or Nick Szabo. Nick Szabo is the guy who thought up smart contracts, which are like applications that run with cryptography on a blockchain. And so, yeah, someone proposed it in like 1992. They talked about trading cards that were, use cryptography, the digital trading cards, to represent that they have a unique value, using different cryptographic security measures to ensure that like it's never copied. You can verify it's the original. It has authenticity. And what they were thinking of is like collectibles, right? Like you have collectibles like baseball cards and trading cards. These have a real world value, even though they're like very abstract as to why that is. You have to know a lot about economics and money, even like you have to ask questions like, what is money? Even though it seems obvious and self-inherent, like you have to be nerdy about that to understand why it's so odd that we lock value into like scarce things like trading cards. And so, yeah, they proposed like, what if we had a trading card that was digital? And that, like, a lot of people point to that and say, well, he's talking about NFTs. Like that's essentially what NFTs became. So probably the first conception of it was in like the early 1990s.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a fair thing to point to, especially given that like when a lot of people talk about NFTs, especially when they talk about it for the first time or the first times, it's often explained with the comparison to trading cards or collectibles. Going back to our conversation about value, the trading card equivalent might be like, there were 5 Charizard Pokemon cards holographic printed around the world, and each of them has a different holographic color in the background. So they're unique in that way, and they're numbered.
And they become very scarce. And it's hard to tell, really, is it the scarcity of it alone that makes it valuable? Or is it scarcity plus unique properties, right? Because scarcity itself, like there's only 5, that's a unique property. But then holographic is its own unique property. It's hard to extricate, like, what are we valuing here? Is it the fact that there's so few of them? Because even things that are very scarce that have undesirable qualities end up being valued a lot. Like Banksy's painting that self-destructed is worth more than when it was together after it self-destructed.
Yeah. That's really interesting that it kind of goes back to that conversation. In 1992, you said?
I believe so, yeah. I could run a quick internet search. In a 1993 message posted to CompuServe's bulletin board, Hal Finney talked about crypto trading cards.
That's super interesting.
Super
Here we
cool.
are here we are almost 30 years later having this conversation, and there's some form of that reality out there. So that's like an interesting rundown on the history of NFTs, and also a bit on what they are and how they compare to other, cryptocurrency that you might buy. So how does it work then? I think that's a question for a lot of people that might be dipping their toes into this and wondering like, oh, I hear XYZ artist talking about it, and I saw on billboards that this artist was selling an NFT. How does it work? Where do you get started? What is minting an NFT? That's the term for creating NFTs. What does all of that mean? What is a step-by-step that artists might need to know about?
Okay, so we talked about Hal Finney predicting like crypto trading cards, right? Like, how come it took so long it took like over nearly 30 years for that to come to bear? Why? Well, before they were talking about doing this cryptographically on everyone's computer on the internet, right? And you're familiar with your computer, so we can use it as an analogy if you don't really understand what all this is about. Your computer is a node on a network, the internet, right? It has copies of data from the internet. It queries data from the internet, and sometimes it posts data to the internet. The internet's just like a network of records that can be communicated about between nodes, your computers, right? And so your computer has a hard drive where you can store files. Let's call that the storage layer. The storage layer of your computer is your hard drive, and you put files on it. What are files? Files are just like data structures. They're a way of communicating data. You have waves, and they have a certain structure to them, and all your waves behave by that structure. And you have like video files, and they all behave by a different structure. So they're data structures, and there's unique data in them. And then you have a CPU. Your CPU is how fast your computer can compute. Let's call that the execution layer. It's executing code. So when you want to move a file from one place in your hard drive to another, it has to execute that. It has to translate all that data through and store it in a new place. So when you give a command to your computer, it executes it on the execution layer, which is your CPU. So you got your hard drive, storage layer, execution layer is your CPU. Okay, every blockchain has a storage layer and an execution layer as well. So you can think of Ethereum like a world computer, right? Except its storage layer and execution layer are the same thing. The entire Ethereum blockchain is both execution and storage and security, but that's a whole other can of worms. We won't get into it. But all these layers are in one blockchain. It's not very advantageous. That's another conversation. Files, right? We talked about how files are just data structures. Every token on Ethereum, including ETH, and ETH is different from other tokens because ETH is the native coin of the Ethereum blockchain, and other tokens are like secondary to it. They're made with smart contracts, which we talked about last episode. But they're all files. They're all just data structures. And we have a standard for interpreting these data structures. So your media player has a standard for interpreting your MP3s and your waves on your computer. It's an app that interprets it. That's a standard. So on Ethereum, every token that you send, every unit of value, has a standard behind it. The ERC20 standard is what is used to create coins on the Ethereum network. So there's all types of coins. There's like Uni for Uniswap. Some people have heard of these coins. And these are traded on exchanges, but they're all ERC20 standard tokens on the Ethereum blockchain. Okay. NFTs are ERC721 tokens. They're a different standard that was proposed later on in Ethereum's life cycle. Someone said we should be able to have non-fungible tokens, defined a standard, the Ethereum community voted on it, and now everyone who wants to make an NFT follows that standard. So that NFTs can be read by all the same apps. They all follow a standard to make it like interoperable. Just like any media player you download can play your MP3, any NFT exchange can accept your NFT because they all behave by this standard when they're created. So when you mint an NFT, which means create, you're using a smart contract to create an ERC721 standard token on the Ethereum blockchain. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think that makes sense. Yeah, like you said, it's really no different if you think about a video file and the apps that could read video files versus an MP3 and the apps on your computer that could read an MP3. Those are different files. They go with different apps, and the protocols or the standards that NFTs use on Ethereum, for example, are different from other types of tokens, which are under ERC20 on Ethereum.
Yep. And so, non-fungible is ERC721. Fungible is ERC20. That's for tokens. And these are standards. They're like protocols. They're like things we agree upon to make everything easier. Like in my neighborhood, we have a standard that we put out the trash every Sunday night, and Monday morning it's picked up, right? And we all behave by this, and things run smoother because of it. ERC721 is also a standard. It's just how you're supposed to code your smart contract on the Ethereum network that creates your NFT. And since everyone's behaving by it, they're interoperable, and we can have this big, ecosystem of NFTs. Now, an NFT is just a data structure, just like your MP3s, just like your text files, just a data structure. And so what can you do with a data structure? You can define, like a title, for instance, has a field, right? So like in the data structure of an MP3, the name of the file is part of that data structure. And they all follow this naming convention, right? So too do NFTs. ERC721s have a standard. And the standard allows for arbitrary data. Arbitrary meaning any data. Whatever you want. So there are parts of an NFT data structure where you can put in whatever data you want. And that's important because that's why we started putting JPEGs on NFTs, specifically links to JPEGs. So the reason you can put a link to any arbitrary file in an NFT is because the ERC721 standard provides for arbitrary data. Okay, so where do we put this file? Because this file, really what it is it's a link to a file. So when you mint an NFT, you have to put in the link to your song or your JPEG or whatever the NFT is supposed to be. That's really why an NFT has a picture associated with it, is because you put a link to that picture in it. Okay, but in blockchain, in crypto, we want things to be decentralized, permissionless, immutable, unchangeable. We want them to be forever and not require human intervention. That's kind of like the spirit of the blockchain ecosystem. It provides for unique superpowers that you can't get if you don't maintain that. So we need it to be decentralized. We need it to be permanent, permissionless. It can't be censored. Okay, so why is that important? Because where do we put this file? If we put it on Amazon or we put it on Google Drive, Google's in control. Amazon's in control, right, not the user.
Yeah.
Okay, so for that, we have these things called decentralized file servers. There's a number of them. The most popular one is the Interplanetary File Server, or the Interplanetary File System, is what it's called, IPFS. It's like the most popular one. And it's decentralized. It's a lot like if you remember the days of LimeWire and Napster. It behaves a lot like LimeWire and Napster and Kazaa and like BitTorrent, right? It's a peer-to-peer system. And so every node on the network serves little shards of the data. So you can reconstruct, just like when you do a BitTorrent, right? Like you remember downloading like BitTorrents back in the day.
Oh yeah. Software, music, video.
Yeah, for sure. Ripping some wares.
Yeah.
So you go to a site where you're searching for seeds. Seeds are like a link that tells your BitTorrent client where to find all the bits of the file that you need.
If you remember Pirate Bay was a big site. Yeah. Big place for downloading these seeds.
what do people put on Pirate Bay? They just put a link that's supposed to represent this file. And if you download it, maybe it's a virus, but maybe it's the file.
So many viruses.
The file's not on Pirate Bay. It's on all these different computers out there, and you can download pieces of the file from multiple different computers, which decentralizes the actual culpability of serving you that file, right? So you didn't share an illegal file with me. You shared part of it. And that's kind of gray area. Like, it's harder to prosecute, right? It's a different type of technology than just you shared a file with me like we did on Napster. So it grabs little pieces of it. Same thing with IPFS. IPFS, when I upload a file to IPFS, it's served by many, many different nodes on the network. But these nodes are not incentivized to serve it. So it's not what we called in the last episode Byzantine fault tolerant, meaning eventually you could imagine, like let's say I'm really popular and people keep downloading my file off of IPFS. All of the people who serve my file are going to be like, this is killing my bandwidth and like electricity costs, and like it's just not going to work out, right? So because they're not incentivized, I can't be guaranteed that when I put something on IPFS, it'll be there forever. It might disappear. And this has happened. NFTs have just like disappeared. The JPEGs that were supposed to represent these NFTs just disappeared because IPFS isn't complete as a solution. So that's what IPFS is, and it's what's used to host a majority of the files that are behind these NFTs. The NFT is just a token. It's just a data structure. The files that are actually corresponding to that NFT are served elsewhere, and then the address of where they are on the internet is put in the NFT. And that's why when you put an NFT on like OpenSea or whatever, you open your wallet and you can see it, it's pulling that file from a different network, not Ethereum. I hope that all makes sense and wasn't unnecessary to explain.
No, I think that's a good kind of debriefing of the foundations to make clear that like the JPEG of your Bored Ape doesn't live on the blockchain.
Right. Exactly. And there are on-chain NFTs. People covet them because you can take data from the blockchain that changes all the time, and you can like use it to construct an image. There's scripting tricks you can do to construct an image off of arbitrary data. And if you do that using only data from the blockchain, then that's a fully on-chain NFT. And people really collect those because it's like, this is cool because it's full of this. It's all on the storage layer of Ethereum. None of it is stored elsewhere. It's completely immutable NFT. Live forever.
That's super interesting. So that gives us a rundown of kind of the structure of the bones or the skeletons of what minting an NFT means.
Well, I should clarify. When you mint an NFT, what you're really doing is you're creating. So there's two ways to do it. Basically, any NFT that's minted is minted by a smart contract. Smart contract is a data structure. In this case, like it's a script. So, when I go to Facebook and I click a button, or I go to Instagram and I click a button, it calls a script. And the script tells, my browser or my phone or my computer what to do now that I've clicked that button. So it's executable. It executes a function because of something I did. If you want executable script on the Ethereum network, you're going to store a data structure that's called a smart contract. And it has an address, just like your wallet has an address on Ethereum. There's an address. It's its own sort of user on Ethereum, except it has script in it. So when I send a transaction to that address, I'm interacting with that smart contract, and the way they programmed it changes what happens. Smart contracts mint ERC20s. Any coin that's not Ethereum on Ethereum was minted by a smart contract because you need something that defines how this coin is traded, this new record, this new data structure on the network is traded. So when you mint an ERC721, you also need a smart contract. There are some like smart contracts that you can use to mint yours and you don't have to know anything. It's like a no code, easy does it experience. And there are tons of those. And there are platforms that do it. Like we talked about SoundXYZ and Catalog.works. They're going to make it easy for you. They have their own smart contract that mints it. But a lot of the NFT drops you see, like Bored Apes, they made their own smart contract for minting the NFT. And when And it has a function in the script called mint. And you can actually just go on any block scanner like Etherscan, and you can go find the Bored Apes contract, and you can send a transaction that calls that mint function. Like Ethereum is like a world computer, right? So it gives Ethereum, the world computer, the contract address, it gives it the mint function and the parameters it wants to put into that mint function, and out comes an NFT. Of course, Bored Apes were minted forever ago, and there's a limit on how many can be minted. So when you do that, the transaction will fail now, but it's still there. The mint function's still there. And so you can use someone else's smart contract on a platform, or you can create your own and deploy it. And there's like services like Open Zeppelin, which is like a great resource. And you can go like take their standardized smart contract, install it yourself, and have your own smart contract that mints your NFT. They have like easy does it instructions for how to do that. But most musicians are probably going to use a platform like Sound XYZ or some other platform.
So there's like three options, really, like three umbrellas. You've got platforms where you can do it like Sound XYZ. You have developers who could code a smart contract to do it, or you have kind of this middle layer where you can get a starting point from Open Zeppelin and use that as a starting point to code your own.
Yeah. And like, so the problem is that on Ethereum is the most popular blockchain, and blockchains are slow. In order for them to be decentralized, you need them to not be very big. And so if you're putting a lot of data on a slow network that's really not built to be very big, it's not meant to be. You're sacrifice cost. So you can have speed, you can have decentralization, and you can have low transaction costs, but you can't have all three. This is what's known as the scaling trilemma in blockchains. And on Ethereum, you can mint NFTs, but it's very expensive. So there's other blockchains that you can do. You can do AVAX, Avalanche, and their transaction costs are very little. In fact, if we wanted to, we won't, but if we wanted to, I could pull up a set of instructions and we could be minting an NFT on Avalanche in the next like 10 minutes. Probably pretty easy. Problem being is that these other blockchains don't have what's called the Lindy effect. The Lindy effect means like the longer something is in existence, the more probable it becomes that it will continue to exist. So Ethereum, Bitcoin, these are blue chip, cryptocurrency protocols. They have the Lindy effect. They're going to stick around. They're coveted. Everyone wants to transact on Ethereum. That's why Ethereum's so expensive now, because it's so clogged. Okay. So if you mint an NFT on like friggin' Polygon or Avalanche or any of these other like Ethereum copycats, it'll be cheap because no one's on it. And they sacrifice security. But it will not be necessarily as coveted. It doesn't have as much value because it's not on Ethereum. Most NFTs that aren't on Ethereum are fractions of the value of an Ethereum NFT. And a lot of the record label, like sort of VC funded protocols are trying to launch NFT factories and platforms off of Ethereum. They're trying to pick some random chain that no one uses and use that as the infrastructure to mint NFTs. But I think the mistake they're making is that like a lot of people love Ethereum. That's why it's so expensive, is because people love Ethereum. And you're telling artists, come mint your NFT here. And it's like half the market doesn't give a shit about Kusama or whatever chain you're launching this platform on. They care about Ethereum. So you're kind of telling artists like a little bit of a lie of omission. They don't know enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an interesting point, and I want to touch on that more when we kind of talk about the value of NFTs and where the future of that might be and where it is right now. But that's a really interesting point. It's really no different, if you think about it, than telling your artist to like try and monetize on a social platform where no one hangs out.
It is. It's very much like that, actually. Because also, just like in Web 2, right? There's network effects. The value, and there's a macro investor, Raoul Paul, who talks a lot about this, but he says, how do you value a blockchain, right? Like you can sort of value internet companies. You have ways to value companies. How do you value a blockchain? One way might be network effects. Metcalfe's law. Metcalfe's law states that like the value of a network is the square of its like user base and the connections on the network or some such shit. And what he's saying is that the more users that a network gets, the more valuable it is. And so it's exactly like that, because the Metcalfe's law and the network effect applies very heavily to social networks. That's the first place it was applied in terms of valuing things. You value a social network based on its amount of users, its network effects. So too with blockchains do you value them.
That's interesting, though, that a lot of the VC-backed and music industry NFT minting operations are off-chain from Ethereum. That's not something that I knew, so that's pretty interesting.
There's a whole chain dedicated to it called Bitsong in the Cosmos ecosystem, which is like an inter-blockchain. It's supposed to make blockchains communicate with each other. Cosmos is the ecosystem. And there's a whole chain called Bitsong that's like meant to be like the entertainers chain.
It sounds like all of the weird social media for artists and creatives that popped up.
Right, dude. It's exactly like that.
Yeah. Remember like 3 or 4 years ago when it would be like every day that a new social platform would pop up and it would be like, people are going to hang out here and they're going to consume your music. And it's like, no, they're not. In 2017, they're going to hang out on Facebook. Like,
right. It's the network effects. It's really, I think that network effects, what they've done is, I think these are all downstream effects from the fact that ideas aren't actually like regular property.
Yeah, we touched on that last episode a bit too.
It's like the type of silly stuff you get way down the line after you make the decision to treat ideas like regular property and not actually address how they're not. And you fast forward that to like 300 years and this is what happens. Yeah, silly ideas like, oh, we're going to make a creator social network is a fundamental mismatch between like what users want and what artists want. They're very different. And ultimately users benefit from the fact that like, they're not really like property. They're not like that.
We've got the rundown on how to mint an NFT and what that means and what platforms you might use for it, or, you know, how you might employ a developer team to actually build the smart contract for you, or maybe you would do it yourself if you're feeling really spry. What about selling NFTs? I know there are plenty of NFT marketplaces out there where people sell their NFTs and, you know, they hope that their fans go over there and pick them up.
Yeah. So that's the reason we kind of wanted to go in deep on minting and all of this like technical stuff is because that way you can know what I mean when I say that a broad majority of the valuable NFTs that have ever been created were minted by the first owner. They weren't sold to the first owner by the person who made them. That's an important distinction because the typical experience for an NFT power user is to go to a site that's known as like a mint site. It's like a landing page where I can click a button, and because the site is a Web3 site, when I click that button to mint, it will send a transaction to my browser wallet that says, you're calling this smart contract and you're minting this token, creating it. So you're the actual one creating it. You're paying the gas to create it. You're paying the transaction cost and you're paying some fee. The mint experience is something that NFT users are very familiar with. And that's why it's more desirable to have your own smart contract, because then they can mint it. Otherwise, you would mint them all and then go put them on like a secondary exchange like OpenSea, where people trade NFTs that have already been minted, which is vastly different from what people are used to. They want to mint it because usually during minting, it's going to cost far less than its speculative value on an exchange. So they're like very separate experiences.
Minting is like getting in early.
It is, but it's also like birthing a thing. It has almost all of the same characteristics as real property. So you're creating real property for yourself out of thin air. It's also like rolling the dice, because a lot of these NFT projects, they randomly generate scarce features. Like you got a gold Bored Ape. Why? Because you were lucky during the mint. The mint randomly was going to make one of these Bored Apes gold, happened to be you because you minted it.
Roll the dice, flip a coin.
Right. So every Bored Ape was minted for the same cost, but they did not end up with the same cost because the unique values were assigned at the moment of the mint.
That's super interesting. So what is that process like? I've never minted an NFT or bought NFTs on an exchange.
It's easy. You go to some sketchy website that looks like it was made by a 2-year-old and you press a like Windows 95 button called mint, and you spend over $1,000 to get what is arguably the most silly piece of crap illustration that you've ever seen in your life.
I have so many friends, as you probably do too, that have gotten rugged on fake NFT minting sites that I just have never been interested in that.
No, a lot of mint sites, like, a great many NFTs get minted. Not all of them by companies that have it all together yet, even if one day they will. They might not have a UI UX person to develop this website. They just have smart contract developers and an artist. That's it. And so, yeah, you end up like with some sketchy web experiences. I'll say that. But on like something like Sound XYZ, it's a lot different. There are second party platforms. They have their own smart contracts. You go to an app that is like a website, and the website is Web3 coded. So not only does it take in its own internal data and have its own internal scripts that are in traditional website territory, it also has scripts that exist on Ethereum or on a blockchain. And so you might be interacting with its own database and its own script, or you might be sending a transaction with your wallet at any given time, depending on what buttons you click. So, this artist went here, gave them his file, gave them the data he wanted, gave them an image, and then they're responsible for, routing that through their smart contract infrastructure to create and mint an NFT. And so, yeah, that's how mints work. And then there's exchanges. After people mint these, there's after sales. A lot of NFTs have reflections. So, okay, I mint this NFT for 0.5 Ethereum. I then go on OpenSea, and let's say 4 weeks down the line, people are buying this thing so much that it's scarce. People don't want to sell. It drives the price up. And so now it's worth like 2 Ethereum. So I have 4x my money. Not a typical experience. Don't go doing this a whole bunch hoping that'll happen. But let's say I did that. So now it's worth 4 times the money. I go to sell it on OpenSea, but the smart contract that minted it doesn't allow for transfers unless the transfer is in the transaction. So for instance, like I could send you an NFT. That's just me sending it. You now own it. No money was given back to me. But if I'm selling you the NFT, I don't want to send it to you and then get the money in a second transaction. I want same time, right? So if I want to sell you it for 2 ETH, you got to give me those ETH as I'm transferring it to you. And that's a swap. And the reason that's important is because this smart contract doesn't allow you to do that unless part of the money coming back to you when you send the NFT goes to the creator. And that's called a reflection or a tax, right? So 2.5% of all secondary sales of this NFT go to the creator. That's one way to think about it. Or, if you're on OpenSea, 2.5% goes to the creator, 2.5% goes back to the exchange as a fee. So I only end up with, 1.9 ETH instead of the 2 that you paid me, because part of it's going back. So that's how secondary exchanges work. And nowadays, music NFTs have a robust secondary market. And there's NFTs that were minted for very little, now selling for many, many multiples of that. And they're music NFTs, and creators benefit from that.
To take us back to the corollary of trading cards or collectibles, the process that you just outlined is like if you were minting Pokemon cards or baseball cards or rock star band cards, I don't know, doesn't matter. If you're minting, on a mint site, you're giving money to the creator in exchange for a certain number of these or one of these NFTs, one of these cards, and then taking it to an exchange is you're essentially putting it in a marketplace where you're taking the thing that you just paid for and minted and saying, I think it's worth more, or letting the market determine if it's worth more, and where other people can then buy or rather swap their currency for the thing that you just minted.
And so this is one of those areas where like it's really useful because like I've been going over these past few episodes, I've gone over a lot of different stuff that seems like unnecessarily technical for like what we're talking about. But now that like I assume you have the experience of having heard me say all that stuff and like roughly comprehended it, now we can talk about like this is why blockchains are valuable, because the network on which the money, the value runs is the same network on which I minted the NFT. But with Pokemon cards, that's not true. The network is like cash dollars, has nothing to do with Pokemon cards. And then like this network mediated by like physical cards and a factory and a company, like They don't run on the same network. So the Pokemon company can't get a tax from my transaction, my secondary sale. If I sell my Charizard to you, they can't guarantee that they'll get a cut of that money. They got to like hope that like I give it to them. And then if they want to make it like a legal thing and a contract that like as being a user, I agree to this, then they have to sue me. But with code is law blockchains, that's not the case, because you're not going to send, your NFT to someone you don't trust and hope they give you the money back. If you were willing to do that, then they couldn't institute a tax on it, because you're sending it in one transaction and they can't prevent you from doing that. I mean, they could, but like that'd be messed up. What if you want to gift it to somebody, right? They can't have a smart contract that prevents you from sending your NFT. That would be messed up. But they can prevent you from doing a swap transaction without a reflection back to them. And you don't want to do a send versus a swap. You want to do a swap. Same time. I'll give you the NFT that's worth like my house, and you have to give me my house worth of money now. I don't want to wait, because that's an incredible risk. So you want it to be in the same transaction. So your incentive to have it all occur in the same transaction is aligned with their incentive to have it occur in a verifiable swap so that they can take a tax from it. That's why it's valuable. It's like once the money runs on the same network as everything else, we have superpowers. A fake property and fake rules become real.
This really solves the problem, what NFTs can do and what smart contracts can do in secondary markets to ensure that creators get a piece of what is theirs or what might be theirs, especially if we're talking about like intellectual property and stuff like that. It kind of solves the scenario in like Western films where it's like, okay, you put down the gun and I'll give you the gold. Who has to exchange first? That problem goes away.
And we don't have to go through an expensive lawsuit to deal with it. Right? We can create a circumstance in which it is impossible to cheat the transaction because they are swapped at the exact same time in the exact same transaction. So you eliminate tons of risk. Let's say all the music listeners were willing to listen to music on chain, or the incentives were such that like you'd be crazy to not listen to music on chain. That would change everything, because now there's no reason someone wouldn't listen to music on chain. And thereby we can like stream payments from their wallet to artists in a second. You could pay by use, how much you listen to, and you could pay directly to the person you listen to. And there would be no overhead fee, nobody to be paid to make sure that happens, nobody to sue to rectify some cheat. It could happen as you listen to it. You could have micropayments streaming from you directly to the artist.
All of those things are clear points of where NFTs can be valuable or why they're valuable. I want to have a little discussion about like why the music industry, because I know a lot of artists are wondering about this. Like I talk to friends who have nothing, who don't do anything with crypto, know nothing about blockchain, and getting them to think about marketing their music is a struggle. So there's a lot of musicians out there that are wondering, like, why is the music industry talking about NFTs so much from a monetization perspective? And are the reasons that we just outlined the same reasons that, there's a whole lot of hype? Or is this just being kind of touted as, or fetishized even as like a way to make a quick buck? I want to preface with saying like, we've taken a pretty neutral position up to this point. I think kind of really just been aimed at being educational. I don't want to necessarily shame music NFT lovers, but I also don't want to put someone down the path of thinking that like this is the end all be all for where monetization in the music business is going. Because I personally, right now, that I feel this way, Circa, and I know you feel similarly. Like where it is right now is not where it's going to be or where it's going. And for that reason, like I'm not really bullish about it.
I think that there's a lot of hard to swallow pills in the 2022 entertainment industry, much less music industry. There's a lot of them. And we don't really talk about them. But like, here's some hard to swallow pills. Music was made into a data structure. I mean, it always was, but you needed expensive equipment to encode it and decode it. So you needed, like a vinyl pressing plant to encode it. And in order to copy it, you also needed a vinyl pressing plant. Now it's a data structure on a computer. And in order to encode it, you need you need free software. That's it. It costs nothing. And in order to decode it and re-encode it and steal it, also free software. So there is no more economic incentive to pay for music in any way. It doesn't exist. Everything else is philosophical. Everything else is psychological. It's a game of incentives. A lot more people pirated music before streaming because streaming just makes it so easy that it's almost like paying insurance. It's almost like, I don't want to get sued and there's an outside chance I might get sued. So I'll pay my, monthly streaming bill because it's so low and it gives me access to all the songs.
Not only that, think about pirating music back in the day. There was a time vector. You were worried about getting viruses.
It's a hassle.
Yeah, it was a hassle. I can think of so many examples of, I'm thinking back to 11-year-old Jack using Kazaa or
like Napster and shit. Yeah.
BearShare or something like that.
It's a huge hassle, a hassle the average user won't go through.
Yeah, think about how many times you downloaded a song from a peer-to-peer sharing network and it turned out to not be the thing that you thought you were downloading,
There was that old commercial where it shows someone armed robbing a CD store and saying that pirating was no different from this. And it's well, it is, because physical theft doesn't require me to sue you. I can just call the police. I could press charges, but ultimately a certain degree of theft will be a charge I don't need to press. You're a serial, grand larceny theft. They will lock you up for that shit. But if I steal a music file, you have to sue me to get your rights enforced. You have to go through a great expense and take on a lot of risk and go through a lot of hassle to enforce your rights. So in that sense, it's not really theft in that way. It's not armed robbery. It's not a danger to society in that way. Furthermore, the consequences of it, because why isn't an idea real property? Well, when I'm using it, you can use it too. It's infinitely reproducible, omnipresent, especially now that music is a data structure. We can all use it at the same time. If I use it, I'm not taking anything from you in terms of value. Instead, I am preventing you from taking something from me, extracting a fee. But then it's well, you own the idea, so you should get a fee. But it's do you own the idea? Did you create it? Because maybe you sequenced out the notes. Maybe you wrote down the words. Where do those words come from? Where do those notes come from? Why are they arranged the way they are? It's you stand on the shoulders of eons of creative, productivity to create any song. So it's kind of abstract value. You didn't just put your labor into it because certainly your labor alone would not have made it. It took also the pantheon of ideas, and those ideas weren't yours. You didn't labor to make those ideas. So everything you create is a derivative of a previous idea. And so that's why it's not like real property. When I use it, you can use it too. So I'm not stealing it from you. I'm not preventing you from enjoying it. You don't fully own it in a real way. And these are hard to swallow pills because it's the argument is getting slimmer and slimmer for why, ideas should be treated like real property. You could say, oh, it's because you get sued. And it's well, not really. You could say it's because it's mine. It's well, not really. You could say it's because I deserve it. And it's make a compelling argument as to how that's the case, Yeah, you really can't. And I'm an artist. So I make a lot of music. Okay. It's not convenient for me to say this. And I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. I'm just trying to be honest with myself and just say this is a hard problem. It's a hard problem. And the US government and the British government before it tried to solve it with law. And law is not a great tool for solving it because it requires the person who was wronged to go through great expense. It's almost infeasible for them to actually enforce their rights, so to speak. And the reason I don't like it, the reason I want to face these problems is because what has happened since they did that? Not a lot of great stuff, okay? It's a lot of really bad things and potentially potentially our solution to, the idea that ideas are not property. Potentially our solution, our implementation has made things a little bit worse, because now artists do not get a lion's share of the revenue generated by their artistic output. And a very small amount of companies own all of the recorded music, all of the productive output by contract. And they're not necessarily nice to artists. They're not necessarily like, let's try to give them as much money as we possibly can. That is very much not the case. It's the opposite. They try to extract as much value from the relationship as they possibly can, and they have a measurable power because of the way we treat ideas like property. So I think we need to face all of that in whatever the future of blockchain, music industry is. And I'll say this. Music NFTs don't even, people who tout music NFTs, they don't even pretend that the value here is to listen to the song. They fully and readily admit that there is an abstract value at play, and we don't really know what it is. We can't really define it very well. Why is it valuable for you to own this music NFT? Not to listen to the song.
That's super interesting that you say that, and that admission is in place, because often what you hear as well is like, oh, it can be more tangible value. Like you can include things like any holders have backstage access to you at your shows for life, or a discount on XYZ thing for the rest of their life.
The thing is, you don't need an NFT to do that.
You don't, exactly.
Secondary to the NFT existing, like you could say, just send me money. Send me money between this date and this date. And if you send me this amount of money between this date and this date, I'll store your email address in a spreadsheet. And now you have free access.
Think about people that have membership sites. They do that kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah, 100%. So it's like, yeah, you don't need an NFT for that. The reason an NFT is valuable, if you're going to look at the membership direction, an NFT is valuable because anything I can do on that network, like the Ethereum blockchain, for instance, let's say I have a smart contract, I created 10,000 NFTs. Because blockchains are open, permissionless, auditable, censorship resistant, I can know at any time what the addresses are of all the holders of that NFT. And if I want to send them all something, I can do it. So anything I can do on the Ethereum network, I benefit from having a list of the holders. So now I have a way to verify that you believe in my project or my artistry, because you wouldn't hold this NFT if not. And so unto you I shall bestow the benefits. Like that's one arguably very unique property of NFTs and holding them that you don't get from just having an email address. But yeah, the reason I said all that is just to say that like the music industry faces a very steep issue. It's hard to swallow pills. Is that like the incentive for music listeners to let go of their money for the right to listen to music shrinks exponentially. Before, when you bought a vinyl, what were you buying? You were buying something to display on your mantle, conversation starter, and you were buying the right to listen. Okay, let's say it was like half and half, right? You buy a $20 vinyl, $10 goes to the fact that it's like a physical piece, that like a token of your adoration of this artist that signifies to the rest of the world that you like this artist. And then $10 was towards the right to listen to the songs that were on it. The right to listen portion of it has gone to almost zero.
It's gone, yeah.
And the conversation piece now exists digitally as an NFT. Isn't that kind of funny?
It is, yeah. It is funny.
But NFTs cost like thousands of dollars. Fans want to listen to your music, and maybe you can get them to buy a t-shirt for the other part of it, the other $10. Where's the value going to come from? Because it's not fans that are going to buy these NFTs. They're priced out of that market.
And I think we see that. Like, you see that in case studies that you hear about music NFTs being launched.
Because the NFT space is not, a monolith. Like, Bored Apes cost $300,000 at the floor. You cannot, in the same breath, in the same environment, say, like, this is like that NFT. It's not.
Do you know of any case studies of, I would love to hear, like, comparison, like, this is a music NFT launch that went very well versus any number of ones that might have flopped. I have an interesting in-between one, but I'm curious to hear what you've kind of dug up in your explorations.
Well, like Blau's NFT launch went really, really well. He made like $3 million in 11 hours or some shit like that. Daniel Allen. His NFT launch went really well. The ones that don't go well, you don't ever hear about them. But like, for instance, like Kings of Leon, right? Didn't they do one that didn't go so well?
They did, yeah. I think something that's interesting, and I was reading about this as I was just like learning and trying to wrap my head around some of these concepts in a deeper way. Here's a good example, and this kind of goes into an investing mindset when it comes to cryptocurrency that I think is an interesting topic for us to kind of close off on here. Shawn Mendes launched an NFT last year, right around this time. I believe it was a Genie's NFT, which is like a wearable. Like you can create avatars in a metaverse kind of world, and he had created these NFTs. People could buy them and then have this wearable that they could then apply to their avatar. At least that was my understanding of it. Its value today is like less than half of what it was initially sold at. What's wild about that is the price of Ethereum has just gone up since then. And that introduces the concept of like, if you were holding this Shawn Mendes NFT, you would have made more money just holding ETH.
You would have made money instead of lost money. I think like ultimately, if you don't know what you're buying is highly speculative because its value is not inherent. You don't even know what it is. So you're hoping that someone ends up valuing it more than you do, or that it provides so much inherent value to you over time that like you're fine with paying that cost. So like when I buy a guitar, I don't think that someone's going to buy it from me for more, but I expect that the enjoyment I'll get out of it is going to be so great. Okay. So the utility of the Shawn Mendes NFT, let's say it's like you get to wear this thing in the metaverse. The metaverse is like years away. And there's a big problem in the metaverse, which is interoperability. Facebook's going to have a metaverse. Sandbox has a metaverse. Gala is going to have a metaverse. Decentraland is a metaverse.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time before Microsoft crops up with one.
Right. And so there's no guarantee that I can take my, Genie's NFT item in their metaverse or whatever they're operable with and take it over to Sandbox. And so if I can't, then it's locked into this ecosystem, and its success can only be a function of the success of that ecosystem itself.
And that goes back to the network effect that we were talking about.
Right. Big time. So metaverse is incredibly, like, it is the turbo speculative end of crypto as a space. And you can see that as if you look at the price charts of metaverse tokens. It's nuts. You have some metaverses that were valued, fully diluted valuation was like in the tens of billions, more than entire US companies that have real products that people need. That said, when we do have like a fully immersive metaverse that is interoperable with all these other metaverses because they all behave upon a standard, just like we talked about ERC 721 standard, if they all had a standardized way of representing in-game in metaverse NFTs, then like, yeah, like this sweatshirt, this hoodie I'm wearing costs $130. I could have gotten one that's blue for like $30. Why did I buy this one? Because it's ice cream and I like the brand and I like Pharrell. And that's part of my like this persona that I think I have, this self that I believe in. And so that we're familiar with that. We're very familiar with like buying an expensive clothing item because you're particularly reverent for that brand. Like we get that. We also get buying scarce physical items because like a Charizard, we sort of understand it. We don't know why we're doing it. We still really don't explore that deep into why this is because it doesn't make any sense, but we do it and we get it. We don't yet get that for the metaverse at an average folks level. Most average folks don't get why you'd buy the Charizard, but right, they really don't get why you'd buy the Charizard NFT. And it's going to be a while before we get anything close to that level of saturation. So I think that's another tough to answer question that we really have to think a lot about is why do we do that? And what is the value there? Because that's what artists are going to represent in the future. You know, our artistic output is going to zero in terms of what it's worth. Not only through just like how the incentives, like how easy it is to circumvent any system. So we have to use very low pricing. We have to lower the price so much that the user is like, all right, I won't steal. And that's its own problem that sends it to zero. And then you have inflation. There's 50, 60 million artists out there making, 100 million songs, being uploaded to Spotify or whatever a day or whatever, like it's a lot. So no matter how good you are, there's like a million other yous out there vying for attention, and people could just go listen to them. So the supply is massive and the demand drops because the alternative is just steal it. And yeah, we don't have an answer for that, but it probably is all wrapped up in like, why the hell would I buy a friggin' Charizard NFT? It's probably somewhere in there.
The idea of like mass market adoption and fandom, I think there's a really interesting sort of overlap between the two of those concepts, and what that might look like in the future. Your best guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that like media very much is like incorporated into the self or the ego, right?
Yeah.
It's like very much part and parcel of like how we construct ourselves. Like I'm a hip hop kid, even like people would say that. It's wrapped up in identity, and we need to get really good at understanding that because like that's all there is anymore, and it seems to be appreciating in value. The part of it that's wrapped up in people's identity seems to be actually getting more valuable.
I mean, I think we see that played out all the time. Think about artists that actually make great offers for their fans, whether it be for merch, whether it be for a launch of a record, whether it be for a tour. Whenever you can tap into the desire for some sort of affirmation towards someone's ego or their very existence or a sense of belonging, we see that constantly at the agency. We see it constantly with indies. Those are the offers that win. Those are the products that make money. Those are the experiences that keep fans around, and that make them want to come to see your show rather than, rapper down the street.
I think that's actually a great point, because it's like I've learned a lot about how to abstract the concept of a token over these last few years. And nowadays, I think of the US dollar as a token. When I pull out a dollar, it's a token that represents my purchasing power. So it represents like real productive output from the entire US economy. I have a portion of it. This is my token, and I can redeem it. I can redeem the token. It's not the actual value. It's not the bricklayer laying bricks. It's not the wheat farmer, farming wheat, but it's representative of that. And it's a token. Okay, this hoodie is a token. It's a token of a brand affinity. We find physical items easier to present as tokenized value of an artist relationship with a fan because it's accepted more places. It has network effects. Hoodies have network effects. People understand them. They trade them. They're well understood by the populace. They're very popular.
Sneakers are a good example of that. Think about sneakerheads, yeah.
Sneakers have network effects. T-shirts have network effects, So NFTs don't have those network effects yet. Not yet. They will, but they're not yet. And for years, we've been telling people, if you're selling music and not tokenized relationship, that's a losing battle. Sell the tokenized relationship. Present products that are cool because of what you feel about this artist, not cool because you have the right to listen, right? I think that's what we've been doing. And that's really worked well. That's helped artists gain control of a private economy with their fans. And so, yeah, I think that's one way of thinking about it, is like we tokenize this artist to fan relationship and this affinity for self-representation. I am punk. Okay. I like these punk bands because these other bands aren't punk. Not how I think about it. So it's this set of bands. And how do I represent I'm punk? I buy their shit. Right?
Right.
That's how I sort of affirm my self-identity, is by like wearing it on my exterior to signal to other apes that I am a punk, right? Okay, that's tokenized. That's tokenization. The t-shirt is a token of your sort of cultural, like lifestyle presuppositions, like what you want to represent. And I think it's going to exist in the metaverse. It's going to exist as NFTs. When I see the NFT space still, trying at least in part to say that this like has anything to do with like music, I think they haven't landed there yet because it doesn't.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good place to, I think, close off. I think we kind of capped this off nicely talking about tokenization and monetization and value that artists can have with their fans and creating, like you were saying, like having ownership over a private economy with their fans. That's the stuff, man. That's all I have to say about it. It's great.
So next time someone asks you, should I do an NFT mint? Tell them, do a t-shirt mint first.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's great advice. Honestly, I really do. I find myself saying often, and I think I might have brought this up on the last episode that we did, that like I've had a lot of conversations with artists. This will be a nice kind of tie up here to just like, if you're interested in exploring more about what Circa and I talked about today, how you can do it. We mentioned this on last week's episode, like get involved in Discords. I had a conversation with an artist recently where he was saying, a new artist, where he was saying, he had been sort of like coaxed into, possibly some sort of NFT launch of sorts along with his artist project. And I was like, why don't you just focus on getting fans first? And my big question to him was like, are you involved in Web3? Do you know about this stuff? Are you engaged with the community? And if you're not, then like, don't bother with it right now. It's not the time. Focus on just finding your fans and, tapping into that kind of primal urge of belonging with them.
I agree. I kind of have to always qualify that though with like, but if you do go like join the right Discords and like have the right conversations, you might get like 20 ETH for a single and like end up becoming like a staple of like what it becomes the future space of the music industry. But you very well may not do that.
Yeah. That's exactly where I was trying to go with it, was to feel out, are you involved in this? Because if you're not, and you're really interested in this stuff, you should probably go hang out there first and learn about it before you try to ape in and make it work. Then what was already going to be a situation of luck is going to be even more of a situation of luck, or more likely lack of luck. But that said, in addition to diving into Discord, and we'll leave the link in the show notes to the Indepreneur Discord server so that you guys can come and hang out with us in there. But also, I want to link to a resource, a YouTube channel called Whiteboard Crypto, which was really helpful for me in understanding and learning a lot of this stuff, especially around NFTs. Really, really great resource. So I'll link to an NFT explainer that kind of visually goes over a lot of the stuff that Circa and I talked about today. If you need a nice recap that's visual, Whiteboard Crypto is great. So shout out to the team over there. But we'll link to that in the show notes. Next week, we're going to be diving into some more of this stuff and some future states of Web3 that could be really impactful for artists from a financial perspective with some awesome guests. So we're looking forward to it. Ed will be back as well. So we'll catch you guys next time, Indies. Thanks for being here. Peace out.
Peace out.
Can y'all really feel us? East Coast, feel us, West Coast.